Welcome to CloudOS Explore, and thank you for joining me on part 2 of AzureStack Deployment Cloudcast. My name is Haliaman, and on this Cloudcast, I will demonstrate the process of provisioning a virtual machine on the Azure Cloud to use to deploy the Azure Stack. So, let's get started. After logging to the Azure Cloud, I will browse to virtual machines and press Create Virtual Machine. We need to choose Windows Data Center template as the Azure Stack operating system requirement is Data Center Edition. Let's choose Windows 2016 Data Center template and press Create. Let's quickly run through the configuration starting with the host name. The disk type I will keep as SSD to benefit from the performance. You are free to specify any username, but remember we need to change this username to administrator after the first login, as the deployment script is expecting administrator account name. And choose your resource group or create one, and OK. Next, let's choose the size of the virtual machine. Note that we are running this deployment for learning and testing. Therefore, I will not follow the Microsoft best practices and choose the minimum hardware specification needed to deploy the Azure Stack. Instead, I will choose a lower CPU and memory to balance between my budget and performance. So I will choose 64 gig RAM and create the virtual machine. And before we start the deployment, I will show you how we can modify the Azure Stack deployment script to avoid the minimum hardware requirement check. So let's choose E8S v3 and press select. On setting, I will keep the default, except I will change the network security group firewall to the group I already configured. Turn the auto shutdown to off and press OK. Let's review quickly and press create. While we are waiting to the provisioning of our new VM to complete and to save time, let's create an Azure Active Directory account which we will be using during the deployment process. So let's browse to the Azure Active Directory, choose users and groups, all users, and let's create a user. And the role for the user must be a global administrator and create. Once created, we can reset the password and copy. We need this password later on. And let's back to the dashboard and check if the provisioning of our new virtual machine complete. The virtual machine is ready. Our next step is to turn off and modify the system disk to 500 gig and add additional 3 disks. Let's start with adding disks by browsing to the disks and start adding. Create a new. Name the disk, disk 1. I will copy the name. And the size, I will keep it 600 gig. Let's create another disk. Name disk 2. Again, 600 gig enough. And the third. Before we save, just change this to read-write permission and save. And with the system disk, let's change and resize to 500 and save and start the virtual machine. Our last step on today's Cloudcast is copying the public IP address to be ready for our third Cloudcast about preparing the virtual machine for the deployment of Azure Stack. With that, thank you for joining me on part 2 of Azure Stack Deployment, Provisioning and Azure Cloud Virtual Machine Cloudcast, and I hope to see you on next Cloudcast.